Hello, and welcome to this training video on the DCS World Mission Editor. In this video, we're going to go over the basic layout of the Mission Editor and some of the common buttons that you're going to be using in the Mission Editor. We also might get into placing units and editing units, but we'll see how it goes. So, first thing is first, you'll see that we are at the DCS World main menu. In order to get into the Mission Editor, as you might have guessed, you go over to the right here where it says Mission Editor, and you click on that. And here you are in the Mission Editor. Now, as you can see, we have a map before us. By default, it's the Caucasus region map. Once DCS World 2 comes out, you will be able to select between the Nevada Test and Training Range and or this map. And once they release the Middle East map, that will also be available as an option. You can move the map around by right-clicking and dragging. You can zoom the map in and out by using your mouse wheel. The mouse actually zooms in the direction of where the mouse cursor is. So if I want to zoom in on Sochi, for example, I can just place my cursor over by Sochi and zoom in, and you'll notice that it kind of zooms in that general direction, and it's actually opposite. My camera is opposite. And same with zooming out. And then if you right click, you can actually measure distances and get general bearings from where you initially clicked to where you're dragging. So from Sukhumi to Nalchik, you're going to be traveling at about 65 degrees, and you're going to be going about 117 nautical miles. Now, as far as the interface, down here in the lower right, we have the date and time of the mission. Well, the date and time of now for you. This is not mission time, this is actual time. You have an altitude indicator here, you have a zoom scale, so as I zoom in, you'll notice that the zoom scaling changes. And as I move my mouse cursor over the water over here, it's at 0 because sea level. And as I move it inland, you'll notice that the altitude changes based on the elevation. The green areas are obviously lowlands. As it gets to white, you're going to notice that it gets higher. And you also can see some of the topographical features here. And as we get up to red, you'll notice that it gets much higher, and the highest point in the map is right here, which is 18,000. There's a spot that 18,400 feet is right about there. 18,432. 18,435. All right. And obviously all of these here, the blue inland is their lakes, lake features. Here's a river moving through, and then it breaks off into much smaller rivers and streams. The orange blocks here with the city names on them are cities. As you zoom in on them, you'll actually notice that buildings and stuff show up the closer you get. So you can plan your missions around those. And of course you have your airports. The airports are all denoted by the blue circles and the airport names, obviously. And zooming in on an airfield, for example, Batumi, will give you a close-up view of where the runway is, all the taxiways, etc., etc. Now in the cities, you have all these orange lines. Those are basically the road system of the city. The black blocks are buildings, and the black lines here are train tracks. Now the map grids, we're not going to go into in this video, but they are there if you need to use them for stuff, and we will get into that in a future video. You'll also notice that you have your latitude and longitude, and that is of the mouse cursor, so wherever you move your mouse cursor to, latitude and longitude changes. Again, we're not going to get into that in this particular video, but that is very useful, especially if you're planning a mission for A-10 Warthogs. They can actually enter those coordinates into their targeting computer or navigation systems and create waypoints, create targets, etc., just using that information. Down in the lower left here, you have the mission name. Useful if you're saving multiple versions of a mission and want to make sure that you're working on a particular version of it. For example, you might have a base mission, and then you might set up a bunch of different possible scenarios. So maybe I have a VIP that needs to be protected, and I want to see what it's like having him drive to one city, and then I want to see how it is having him drive to a second city. And I can save those as two distinct maps from one map, and then based on which one works better, I can then save that as the main map. That way I'm not overwriting my, I'm not overwriting my original map. I can go back and make changes, or scrap both of those versions and create a completely new one if I need to, depending on how they work. We've got our exit button down here, which will actually take us out of the mission editor and just back to the main menu. And then we've got all of our shortcut keys over here on the left. And most of this functionality is frequently used stuff, and most of it is also mirrored in the menu up here on the top, but I find these more convenient, the buttons. If you hover over any of these buttons, a little tooltip will show up and tell you exactly what that button does. So if you ever forget what any of these does, or can't remember exactly where you went to do that one thing you did that one time, you can always mouse over these guys and get a little tip on what the button actually does. So let's start from the top. You can do you can create a new mission, you can open a mission, you can save a mission. Here you can set up the mission briefings, and those are the screens that you see when you first open a mission before you actually get into the cockpit and fly. They're the piece, like the booklet that has the pictures on the one side and then the mission briefing on the other side. And then once you actually get into the mission, it's the sheet that you see before you fly that shows you what your red team and blue team objectives are for that mission. You can create the weather, you can change it if you want a specific weather system for your mission, or you can actually create dynamic systems, and we'll get into that as well in a future video. Here you can create triggers, and triggers are basically, they add dynamic elements to the mission. They're basically events that are triggered by user action. So, for example, if you fly into a specific trigger zone, which you can also create using one of the buttons on the side, if you fly into that specific zone, maybe an enemy AAA site will activate, and now you've just made the mission harder for yourself. Or if you blow up a specific building, maybe that housed, maybe you take out a barracks and now the enemy can no longer support themselves, or a radio station and they can no longer call for help. Things like that. Triggers are pretty much an integral part to really, really good detailed missions, and we're going to be using a lot of triggers when we start getting into actually designing and implementing a mission. You can set up mission goals, which are basically ways to give sides points based on what they do. You can set up battlefield commanders, which tie into the combined arms module, so that you can have a particular number of people who can be commanders on each team. You can also set it up so that pilots can be commanders as well. You can set the mission options, and these are basically the same options that you have in your settings, the configuration options, but you can enforce them for your mission. So, for example, a lot of people like flying with labels because it's definitely hard to see enemies. But in your mission, you want to, let's assume you want to make a super realistic mission, and you don't want anybody to fly with labels. You can actually enforce that labels are off, and nobody can fly with labels. No one will be able to turn them on, not the host, not anybody. Now, of course, the host can always edit your mission and turn this off, or if you've been flying missions where you're not able to use labels, perhaps it's because that mission has that set here, you can definitely go in and uncheck the enforce option, and then what ends up happening is whatever the host setting is what is used in the mission. And then you can fly your mission by clicking this. This is a quick preview. It's a single player preview. You cannot test multiplayer missions using fly mission. You can start up your mission, and then it'll give you a list of all the flyable aircraft that you can select and fly it, but you can't play with other people in your mission by using this quick fly mission button over here. Which brings me to a Small aside. Anytime you open the mission editor, you should always go to either File New or File Open, and either open an existing mission that you've been working on, or create a completely new mission. And that's anytime you go from the main menu into the mission editor. If you are working on a mission and you click Fly, you fly the mission, you exit the mission, it brings you back into the mission editor. As you expect, it'll leave off where you left off. It'll have your mission open already, all of your units will be set up the way you left them, and you can make any changes you want. I had one instance where I was working on a multiplayer mission. I had started the mission, I had made a bunch of edits. I think I closed it that night, and the next day I came and opened it. I worked on it a little bit, saved it, worked on it a little bit, saved it. I think I worked on it a little bit more and saved it again, so I had 3 saves from when I opened it. And then my friends were like, oh, let's test your mission. You know, we're all home from work now. We want to fly. Let's see how your mission's shaping up. And I said, all right, so I saved it again, so that's 4 saves since my initial open. So I exit the mission editor by clicking the little red exit here, went into multiplayer, loaded up my mission, flew around with my friends. We had a good time. We found a couple of bugs that I then wanted to go in and fix, obviously. So exit multiplayer, come back into the DCS main menu, open the mission editor, and it opened. It had my mission preloaded, and I thought, great. I went ahead and started making edits. About 30 to 45 minutes later, I realized that the edits that I were making were based on the original file open that I had done and not my last save. So I had lost 4 saves worth of mission edits because for some reason, and this might have been fixed, this might have been patched in a more recent update, I'm not 100% sure. I never trusted after that, but I had lost all of that work and had to go back and actually re-edit my mission, re-edit all of those changes into it, which was a pain in the ass. So anytime you go from main menu into mission editor, always open your last mission. Make sure that it loads whatever changes you think you've saved from the and the mission that I had saved was fine. That was okay. That the problem was that I had actually saved it again in between, so I actually did lose all of my, but I went and tested it, and if you save a mission and then reopen that saved mission, all the mission data is there. Just for whatever reason, if you go from DCS World to multiplayer and then back, it caches the first open and not the last save, which I don't quite understand that, but I don't leave it to chance anymore. Anytime I open the mission editor, I go File Open, open that save, and work from there. And the same thing with File New. You might come into a mission here, and you might have an idea for, you know, what you want your teams to be, what planes you want to use, what your enemies, you know, what enemy units you want to be targeting, and then you might work on half a mission, only to realize when you start placing enemy units that the particular country that you're trying to place doesn't have any of the units that you want to use, and then you have to go and start a new mission anyway to set up the teams correctly, because as far as I know, there's no way to edit the teams once you've started a mission. So always make sure you go File New or File Open. That being said, we'll get into the object buttons over here. So if you want to place planes or helicopters or ships or vehicles of any kind, vehicles meaning cars, trucks, tanks, enemy tanks, friendly tanks, any kind of vehicle that you want to place is in this dialog. Static objects, it's got a picture of a bridge. You can place buildings like warehouses, you can place road outposts, checkpoints and things like that. You can place target buildings, barracks, etc., etc. All of that is in there. You can set initial point objects. You can set the bullseye objects. So these guys here, you can actually select them and move them around for red team and blue team. You can set trigger zones, and these are those zones that I was talking about earlier, where if, say, a friendly flies into a particular area, say north of the Georgia-Russia border that runs along this mountain range, a bunch of Russian fighters might be scrambled from one of the Russian air bases up here to the north to come in and engage the threat. they tie very heavily into triggers, so we will be getting into those as well in the future. You can set up template groups. These are basically, for example, if you like placing SAM sites in a particular orientation, you can create a template, and then you place the template, and it'll always place the units in that particular fashion. You can view a list of your trigger zones, which is useful if you have a mission that has a lot of them. In my mission, Asset Extraction, I think I have somewhere around 50 different trigger zones. So going through the map and trying to find them, especially since you can hide them so that you keep the clutter off of your map, definitely useful to pull up a list and just be able to select what you want to work on and work on it, and instead of having to hunt it down. Same thing with your unit lists. Again, Asset Extraction has probably 150 units in it. Definitely nice to just click on a list of units and select what units I want to edit and edit them without having to go and hunt them down on the map. And then there's a button over here for removing objects. Whatever you have selected will get deleted from the map. I like using the delete key on my keyboard. Works a little better for me. Now over here you can select the map options, and these are basically the overlays. So decluttering the map, if I don't want to see any of the airports for whatever reason, I can just uncheck that and they go away. If I don't want to see any of the geographical, like the grid, I can actually click on that, and the ISO lines and the MGRS grid, those go away. It just gives you kind of a less cluttered map if that's something you like to look at. You can get rid of the towns. I usually keep everything enabled just because I like to see, well, I get rid of the grid lines sometimes just because they do kind of get a little cluttered, but pretty much everything else I will keep open. And then here you have a more permanent ruler, so when you click and drag and then let go, it actually stays on screen, but it only stays on screen until you either click somewhere else or select some other thing to do. So I'm not entirely sure what the usefulness of that is when you can just middle mouse click. I guess if you don't have a middle mouse button, it is definitely useful. So you can click from Sochi to Sukumi and see that it's 62.8 nautical miles at 119 degrees. And that basically covers the basic, most used functionality of the map editor. Let's go ahead and go through the top menu, just in case there's anything that was left out. So if we click on File, you'll see that you have your New, Open, Save, Save As, and Exit. Fairly straightforward. Edit, you have your Add Plane, Helicopter, Ship, Static, Template, and your Remove. I don't know why you would want to remove something using the menu when you've got a button for it over here, which is much quicker to use, but to each their own. If you like using menus, that'll definitely work for you. You've got your flight menu here, where you can actually fly the mission as you have it. You can prepare your mission. You can also do your track recording and track replays up here. This is where you would come if you wanted to go and view a replay or record a movie from a replay. This is where you'd go. I haven't had much success with Record AVI. I think it's a little bit buggy at the moment. I've had 1 out of 10 or 12 videos record properly using Record AVI. So generally what I do is I go into replay, and then I'll use OBS or DxTory or Fraps or whatever screen recording software you're comfortable with, and record from there, and then you can edit it later. If you have a bunch of related missions, you can actually bundle them into a campaign using the campaign builder. You can customize the mission options, which we already went into. There's a button for that down over here. You can customize the map options. Again, that's the same thing as what we've already seen. You can actually generate missions. The mission editor has a generator where you can set up, what style of mission you want, what type of plane you want to fly, and it'll actually create all the enemies and waypoints for you. Kind of cool if you just want to jump into a mission real quick, or if you want to start with a base and then edit it from there. That was the encyclopedia, which I guess I clicked on, which is in miscellaneous encyclopedia, and the game credits, where you can see what version you have and all the people who have spent countless hours on DCS to make it as awesome as it is. So, in a nutshell, that is the DCS Mission Editor. Real quickly, I'm going to go into placing units on the map, and the way that you do it is pretty much the same for any type of unit that you're going to be putting down. So what I'm going to do is at Kabuleti here, actually, you know what? Let's start from scratch. I'm going to go to File, New, and go over how to create a brand new mission, because I told you that it's very important to always do that. So let's go ahead and click on our quick block here and say, yes, we do want to create a new mission. We haven't made any changes, so I don't really care if they're lost. And you get presented with this dialogue. And it looks a little confusing, and until you understand it, it might be. Basically, you can select your teams, and you can select the map that you're working on. Right now, the only map that's available is the Caucasus map for Georgia, Russia. So that's the only one that you can select. You have a list over here. Once they add the NTTR range, you'll be able to click that. Once they add the Middle Eastern map, you'll be able to click on that. It's got a little preview image of the map. For the Caucasus map, it's a satellite view. For the Nevada map, I don't know, it might be a picture of Vegas. I'm sure they can put whatever picture they want there. Just to give you a little preview highlight of what the map that you're selecting is. And it's got a little description here of what the map is as well. Now, as far as the teams, you can select what team you want all of these countries to be on. And the way that you place vehicles on the map is basically revolves around the country. Each country has a set list of units that it can use. For example, the insurgents cannot use F-15s because in real life, an insurgent group would probably not have access to F-15s. They're going to have old model MiGs, tanks and things that have less armor on them than, say, T-72s from Russia, etc., etc. So generally the way that I set my teams up is based around what units I want to use on each team. Insurgents are always on Red Force, and then I have these other countries on here as well, just because some of them have units that the insurgents can't use, and so I tend to select from them. As far as I am concerned, all of these countries on this side would be like an insurgent nationality. I'm just borrowing units. And the way that you switch your teams up is you just select what country you want, and you can either move it from red team to blue team by using these arrows over here in between the two, or you can move it from a team to a neutral team by using the arrows down here on the bottom. Neutral teams don't get involved in conflict. You can actually set your airports to be affiliated with a team, so you can have, if you're making like a player versus player multiplayer mission, you can have specific airports that are aligned with the red team or the blue team, and all that really means is that if a blue team plane lands at a red team airport, he won't be able to refuel or rearm there. He'll be able to land, he just won't be able to do anything else. So picking which teams you want on which side could be important based on what kind of mission you're making. Neutral airports won't refuel or rearm either team, and they won't get engaged in any kind of combat. So I usually don't have any neutrals because I don't. But your needs might vary. So once you have this set up the way that you want it, you can click OK to start a new mission. If you think you're always going to be using the same settings, you can click Save, and it'll actually save those as the defaults when you create a new mission. So this is how I have it saved by default, so I can click OK. My new mission is now ready for me. Now what I'm going to get started with is just placing a simple unit. Let's start at Kabuleti, because it's a larger airport. I'm going to zoom in on it pretty well. And let's place an Su-25T. So I'm going to go over here and click on Add New Plane. You'll notice that our Add New Plane dialog shows up. And the only thing that I'm going to select over here at the moment, I might give it a name. So let me say Su-25T initial flight. and I can select my country here. The USA does not have Su-25Ts because in the real world, the USA doesn't have any Su-25Ts. So I'm actually going to have to select a different country. Let's go ahead and select Russia. Russia does have Su-25Ts. Let me scroll down, and there we go. They also have Su-27s, Su-33s, also things that the USA doesn't have, and neither do the insurgents. But here we go. I'll click Su-25T, and you can select the pilot skill. You can make it any of these, including random, and you can also set it to client, in which case, in the case of a multiplayer game, it would be one of the people who join the match would be able to fly this. Otherwise, it's considered an AI plane, and the AI takes over for it. So in this case, I'm going to select client. I'm going to give the pilot name Su-25T Pilot 1. And then I'm just going to click somewhere near Kabuleti. And you'll notice that it's placed the aircraft down here. It's got the A on it. It's got all of my settings saved here. And I can actually, once I've placed the unit, I can select it as the player, and that would be for, say, a single-player mission. This would be the plane that the player is placed in. Client will give anybody the chance to fly in it, and if you wanted to create a single-player mission where you could fly in any number of aircraft, you could definitely set all of them to client, and when somebody joins, they will be presented with a menu of which plane they want to fly with. That's definitely an option. But the player selection will put the player in that aircraft. It gives me a BORT number and a call sign by default. I don't generally mess with those in the Russian aircraft. If you're using an American aircraft, for example an A-10 or a UH-1H Huey, the call sign is actually a drop-down, and you can select an English NATO designation, and that's what is relayed over the radio. So something to keep in mind. Now, since this is one of our own aircraft, and we're going to be flying it in our mission, I'm not going to mess with hidden on map or late activation. We'll get into that later. I am going to mess with the waypoint area here. Right now, it doesn't have any waypoints. We just placed it. But since we just placed it, and this is always the case, the next click that we make anywhere on the map is going to be a waypoint. So if I wanted to fly from Kabuleti to, say, Sukhumi, and I want to start at Kabuleti, let's say I want to fly out over the ocean a little bit, there's my first waypoint. And DP stands for destination point. So that is the first and last waypoint. Now if I click over here, say I want to fly over to this river, now that is the destination point. This is waypoint 1. And then I want to kind of line up with this little peninsula here before going into land. And then I'll land at Sukhumi. Now, the way that the waypoint system works, by default all planes start in the air, and they're all moving, and they're all basically in flight unless you set them differently. This last destination point is not a landing point, even though I've pretty much placed it on Sukhumi. It is a turning point waypoint, which for the AI means that the AI is supposed to turn such that they go over that point in flight. I'm actually going to set that to landing. And now you'll actually notice that Sukhumi changed from white to blue, indicating that now, since a blue team aircraft is going to be landing there, this will be a blue team airport. And then I'm going to go back and set the same for my takeoff. The plane is actually going to, by default, start in the air, but for the purposes of this, I want to set it up to take off from one of the parking lot spots. Now, one of the things with the waypoints is if I come over here and try and click on my plane, it's actually just going to add another waypoint. Even though I've set that as the landing waypoint, the waypoint editor, as long as add is checked, you will keep adding waypoints until you unselect it. So I'm going to go over here and delete these last several waypoints that I added. all the way up to the last landing waypoint. And then I'm going to click on Edit. Now I can actually select my aircraft here. And I can set this initial point here to be a takeoff from ramp. Now you can set takeoff from runway, in which case the aircraft actually starts at the runway, ready for takeoff, engines on. Might be something that you would want to do if you're just testing a map. You don't want to run through your startup sequence every single time. You just want to get up, fly, test where your units are placed, test how the mission flows, etc., etc. Start as a takeoff from runway waypoint. As soon as you load the mission, you're ready to go. You can also say takeoff from ramp, at which point you will start in one of the parking spots, which are usually designated by little hangar icons or these bunkered parking spots. Kabuleti also has a line of parking over here, which is not immediately visible. But once you start changing which parking spot you want to be in, your aircraft will move itself around. Unfortunately, the only way that you can select which parking spot you want to be in, there's no way to just know or just click, and like I can't drag him over here. He'll always go back to what parking spot he's set at, which is a little annoying, especially if you're not familiar with an airport. But it doesn't take too long to go through and select where you want to start from. For this one, I'm going to start in parking spot number 29, which is right here by the runway. So I can just taxi straight out and then take off. You'll also notice that once I set this to a takeoff, Kabuleti turned from white to blue as well. You'll notice Batumi is still white, indicating it's a neutral airport. Sanaki, Kataisi, those are all neutral airports. Kabuleti is now a Blue Force airport, and Sakumi is also a Blue Force airport. All the rest of these are neutral. Now, if you wanted to change the affiliation of an airport, you can always click on the airport icon, and it'll give you the coalition that it's aligned with, so neutral, or you can select red if you wanted to, or you can select blue if you wanted to, and that will change them to, the name of the airport will change to the color of the coalition that it's affiliated with. So now, for example, I could conceivably land at any of these airports over here and get service from my aircraft. And then if I turn Sochi to red, I would not be able, I mean, I'd be able to land there unless I put enemy AAA in the area, which by default there aren't any. And I would be able to land there, but the airport ground crew wouldn't even respond to me if I were to land and say, you know, give me more fuel. I wouldn't get a response. The same goes for neutrals. They just ignore you. So here we've got our plane set up, ready to take off from parking spot 29 on the ramp. You can also select take off from parking hot, which means you're still going to start from this parking spot, but your aircraft is going to be on and ready to taxi. Again, if you want to test the dynamics of a mission without having to go through a startup sequence, and you want to test it from, you know, taxi, maybe you want to test and see if a couple of units that are supposed to fly over the airport, you know, to give you a really cool cinematic effect as you're taxiing down a taxiway. Maybe you want to try and time that so that they're doing it as you're taxiing. You could set it up so that you're already ready to taxi and then just go and fly your mission and mess around with your unit timing that way. And maybe you just don't want to have people, you know, go through the hassle of having to start their aircraft again. It's really up to you. The mission is yours. So here we are, set up takeoff from ramp. The altitude and speed settings here for the initial point, the starting point, don't mean anything when it's a takeoff waypoint. They are more relevant when you're actually in the air. And here's an interesting thing: if you want to select your aircraft, you can actually, you know, click on it, and then to select other waypoints, you can either click on the waypoint themselves. You'll notice that they turn yellow when you select them. But you can also select them from here in the waypoint dropdown, or use the arrows to cycle through them. And it'll tell you what type of waypoint it is. So here, this is our starting point. Takeoff from ramp, parking spot 29. Here's your feet and speed, which again don't mean anything. And then as I go to turning point number 1, altitude is set at 6,500 feet. And what that's going to do in the SU-25T, if you've watched my SU-25T tutorial series, that's going to put the flight director up in the air until you get to 6,500 feet, and then it's going to center it on your HUD. I'm actually going to lower that down to like 5,000 just to make it easier to get up there. There's no real reason to be that high from the start anyway. And speed of 270 knots, yeah, that's fine. I'm alright with that. And it's going to take me an estimated 2 minutes and 17 seconds to get to this waypoint once I take off. And if I go to a waypoint 2, it's also set at 6562. That's kind of a default. Maybe I want that to be 10,000. Speed of 270, alright. It should take me 9 minutes and 3 seconds to get there. And that's just kind of giving you an estimate so that when you're planning your mission, if you're trying to have a bunch of different planes from a bunch of different locations get to the same spot at the same time, you can kind of get an idea of how long it's going to take aircraft to get to a particular spot. Or if you have an enemy convoy that you want, say, a flight group of Su-25s to engage at a particular area, you can have the convoy timed to get to that general area about the same time as the waypoints for the Su-25Ts will get them there. That way you can plan your mission around that. And then waypoint 3 here, again another turning point waypoint. The type here, as far as turning point or flyover point, is more for AI than a pilot flying, like a human pilot flying. A human pilot is always going to see that it's there. It's going to be in a particular spot, and really it's up to that pilot to decide how they want to deal with the navigation aspect of the waypoint. For an AI pilot, when they get to a waypoint, if it's a turning point, they are going to get to that waypoint and turn so that they, like if this is the waypoint, they're going to turn so that they actually cross over the waypoint in the middle of their turn. If it's a flyover point, basically what they're going to do is they're going to fly straight to that waypoint and then start their turn. So their turn might actually take them, a little bit outside of their waypoint line. The turning point basically ensures that they stay on their waypoint path more so than having to fly over that point. Again, it's really up to you if you want them to specifically fly over an area. I generally usually keep it turning point. I don't see any reason to make it any different. But I'm actually at waypoint 3 going to lower my altitude to, let's say, 4,500 just to get set up for landing. So this is really a quick, flight, take off, pop up to 10,000, descend again, and then land at Sukumi. And then as for my destination point, it's going to take me about 14 minutes total to get from my starting point to waypoint 3. So this is going to be about a 15 to 20 minute flight. If I go to my destination point, it says 17 minutes, 24 seconds to hit my landing. Again, it's an estimate. I would probably say, if somebody asked me how long my mission was going to take, I would take a look at that and probably say around 20 minutes, 25 minutes, just, to give a little bit of overhead. But if they were to take off immediately and then fly the waypoint route exactly the way that it's set up, it should take them 17 minutes and 24 seconds to get to the destination. Now, I'm going to go back to, well, I guess I don't need to, but I could always go back and click on my starting point, and we're good with that. Now, I can also, from this menu here, edit my payload, the weapons that I have on my aircraft. I can set up some triggered actions for this particular aircraft. This is more relevant to AI than human controlled, but you can also set up system failures and things with triggered actions. So as somebody's flying, if they get to a particular point and you want their engine to flame out, you can definitely do that. This is your summary. You're basically you're starting at noon. It's going to take you about 17 minutes to get to where you're going. Your route is 78 nautical miles long. And your average speed is 270 knots because we never changed the speed, but you always could. And that's pretty much that. And I believe this is your failures over here. But it doesn't seem to be actually doing anything. So we're going to ignore that. Here's your payloads. There's the empty one is selected by default. You can tell which one is selected based on which one is highlighted dark. And these descriptions over here give you a generalized, well, actually they give you a very specific description of what is equipped. But the little pictures here also give you a pretty good idea of what you have. So here we've got Mercury low light TV pod, you got your gun pods, Vickers, and then your various other missiles, and then your electronic countermeasure pods. Now you can change any of these loadouts by right-clicking, very similar to the payload editor in-game. It'll give you a little drop-down that shows you, various things that you can equip on those pylons, and you can select them. You can delete lines if you want to. You can rename them if you want to. You can copy them, and it'll actually just create a new row for you down at the bottom. So if you wanted to base a new payload off of something, like for example, if I wanted this 4 gun pods, but I also wanted to put a Mercury pod on there, or a Phantasmagoria, I can say copy, just say OK. I can rename that later if I want, and I can click on the middle and go over to the Phantasmagoria pod. And that way I still have my default, but I've also got my new one as well. And that's the payload editor. When I'm done, I can actually just click this X up here. The payload editor also lets me modify my fuel levels here, fuel weight. You can see that at 100%, I've got 8,000 pounds of fuel. I can always change that. Here is my maximum takeoff weight here, which you can go over if you want to. It will make the aircraft harder to handle, but that's the maximum recommended. And I'm at 94% of that with the fuel that I have, the weapons that I have installed, the amount of chaff and flare that I have installed, and how much gun ammo I have. And you can also select your paint scheme. So if you want a specific paint scheme for your aircraft, you can definitely set that over there. And we'll get into the triggered actions and things once we start creating a mission. But that is basically the essentials on creating a new map. If I go up here and click save, since I don't have a mission name specified, it's going to give me a place to save. By default, it puts it in your saved games, DCS missions folder. You can always specify that to be something else. I don't see a reason to make it anything different than that. I would just leave it at that. You can also click on my missions over here to quickly get back to that folder. And then name it whatever. And then click OK. And you'll notice that the name of the mission has changed down here to First Mission. And your unit is here, your airports are set. You could always click on Fly Mission right here, and you would be put in the seat of your Su-25T with a waypoint plan already laid out. And you would fly the plan, get to your end airport, and be done. That would be the end of the mission. So I hope that this helped. The next mission tutorial that we, next mission editor tutorial that we get into, we'll actually start coming up with a mission and putting that together. If you guys have any ideas for a mission that you guys would like to design, go ahead and put them in the comments, and we will see what we can do. Otherwise, we're just going to hit the drawing board with our next video and start coming up with a simple but cool and involved mission that we can always start working on. One last thing, I hope you like the new format of the videos. If you think that the inclusion of my face is a little weird, go ahead and let me know. I can always get rid of it. I can add it. I can always tailor these to what works best for you guys. And I'm also on Twitch, so if doing like a live mission edit thing would kind of be something that would be something that you guys would be interested in, we could kind of group source a mission. I could always start streaming and take suggestions through the Twitch chat, and see what we can do going from there. So I really kind of want this to be, you know, an involved process. The mission editor is not something that you can just kind of be like, here's how you do it, and have people just pick it up and work with it. It's definitely something that lends itself to a more collaborative process. So, like I said, leave any comments that you have in the video comments below, and let me know what you think. And we will take it from here and see where we can go with it.